Hi, this is Father Don Planty, pastor of St. Charles Borromeo Catholic Church in Arlington, Virginia. Welcome to the St. Charles Church Talks podcast.
Good evening, everyone. St. Paul says that, I quote, "Here we have no lasting city, but we seek the one that is to come." And he says, our citizenship is in heaven. This is from the letter to the Hebrews and the letter to the Hebrews. We're not really sure if St. Paul wrote it or not, but Hebrews and Philippians. My friends, like the Israelites in the desert, this life of ours is an exile. As we make our way through this desert, on our way to, we hope, the promised land, as the old prayer says, mourning and weeping in this valley of tears. And that's because here on this earth, in this life, everything is passing away. The world as we know it is passing away, and we have no lasting home here. And yet, we do have our mother, the church, which is our home here on earth, and we hope our forever home in the next life. So I just want to give a simple meditation on the church as home for all of us this evening. My dear inspiration and friend, you may know, if you've known me for a while, if you've heard me talk several times, I refer to my two girlfriends as Ella Fitzgerald, that great jazz singer, who I'm just in awe of, and Flannery O'Connor, that great Catholic Southern novelist. Flannery O'Connor, in one of her letters, and I recommend her correspondence to your reading, even to your spiritual reading. She does great apologetics and explanations of the faith and every aspect of the life of faith. In one of her letters to a friend of hers, she wrote in 1960, she was in New York for a while, in New York City living for a while, and she was very introverted and very shy, she says. "I went to St. Mary's as it was right around the corner, and I could get there practically every morning. I went there 3 years and never knew a soul in that congregation or any of the priests, but it was not necessary. As soon as I went in the door, I was at home." For Flannery O'Connor, being in the church, being there for the holy sacrifice of the Mass, for daily Mass, meant being at home, wherever she was. And she kind of preferred it that way because she was such a radical introvert. And yet, as I'd like to share with you, from my own experience in my own life, the church is home not just because at the church we encounter the Lord through the celebration of the sacred mysteries, and as Flannery O'Connor said, as soon as we go in the door, we're at home. But I think also, and especially different from Flannery O'Connor's experience, it's in and through the church that we find the greatest friends and really find that we are at home because we're in company with the other saints in the household of God. I have been extraordinarily blessed in my life, having grown up in a foreign service family, to have lived almost a third of my life overseas, and then also through my own priestly duties. And I've been blessed to travel to so many places. And so I want to share with you some theological, but also some personal reflections on how the church is our home, including some stories from my own experience. I'd first mention that the church is our home because home is where we're from, right? And our home, as we grow up in our families, in our homes, is where we really develop our identity. The Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraph 2030, says this: "It is in the church, in communion with all the baptized, that the Christian fulfills his vocation. From the church he receives the word of God containing the teachings of the law and Christ. From the church he receives the grace of the sacraments that sustains him on the way. From the church he learns the example of holiness and recognizes its model and source in the all-holy Virgin Mary. He discerns in it the authentic witness of those who live it. He discovers in it the spiritual tradition and the long history of the saints who have gone before him and whom the liturgy celebrates in the rhythms of the sanctoral cycle." The Catechism makes the point that the church is where we first develop our identity, because our identity is to especially being made in the image of God and to share in his likeness. That is, to share in the life of holiness, to share in the life of God, not individually, but as part of the mystical body of Christ, as part of the communion of saints, as a member of the church. And so it's especially in the church that we find our identity, even from the earliest age as we grow up and we learn our prayers and are brought to church by our parents and are brought to catechism class or go to Catholic school and study the faith and are initiated into the sacraments and celebrate our first penance and our first communion and then our confirmation, right? As the Catechism says, we're nourished with the Word in the church, we're nourished with the sacraments, we're nourished by the great example of holiness of the saints who surround us. And so it's really first in and through the church that we find out, that we're first aware of who we are and called to be, sons and daughters of God who find a home in Him and in His church. Right? Church is home because what's a home? A home is where the family is. And ultimately, our most important family is our spiritual family, our communion of saints. St. Paul does, in his letter to the Ephesians, refer to the church as the household of God. Right? That is where the family of God gathers together. And so we really do find family in the church. And like family, the great thing about family is you got to love them, even if you don't always like them, right? Because you're kind of stuck with them. When I was chaplain at Christendom College, a small Catholic private college out in the Shenandoah Valley for 4 years, oftentimes we would be approaching Christmas break and the students were overburdened with having to get papers in and study for final exams and everything. And they'd be like, I can't wait to get home and see my family and my mom's cooking and everything. And I would say to them, family's overrated. And they'd get shocked and look at me like, Father, how could you say such a thing? And I said, mark my word. You're going to go home, and after 2 weeks, you're going to be so tired or sick of your family, you're going to be jonesing and to be with your friends again back at college. And they all came back from Christmas break and said, Father, you're right. That's because we can pick our friends, but we can't pick our family, but we still love them anyway. I mean, they're our family, right? But it's kind of like you can't choose who they are, so we love them. But if the family is our household, where we really grow and find love for the first time and loving relationships for the first time, as challenging as they can be, it's the same with the church, which is the household of God. And like in our families in the church, we don't pick who else is in the church, right? And some people we get along with better, and some we like better, but we certainly all are on the same, I'm going to say on the same team. We're all in the same household of faith. We're all part of the same family. And we love one another, and we rub up against each other, and we challenge each other, but it is a family. And it's especially here, again, along with our natural family, it's in our supernatural family where we first develop our identity and realize our dignity as sons and daughters of God and brothers and sisters of the saints. That is, the saints on earth, the communion of saints on earth, and those, of course, that have gone before us in heaven. The church is also our home because the church is our mother. Again, as the Catechism teaches, paragraph 2040, a true filial spirit toward the church can develop among Christians. It is the normal flowering of the baptismal grace which has begotten us in the womb of the church and made us members of the body of Christ. In her motherly care, the church grants us the mercy of God, which prevails over all our sins and is especially at work in the sacrament of reconciliation. With a mother's foresight, she also lavishes on us day after day in her liturgy the nourishment of the Word and the Eucharist of the Lord. The church is our nourishing mother. And a mother gives life to her children and nourishes her children. And the church is our mother because she gives us the life of God and nourishes us with His grace. And interesting how the Catechism especially highlights the mercy of God. With her motherly care, the church grants us mercy, especially in the sacrament of reconciliation, right? A mother understands, when a child misbehaves, when a child gets in trouble, and mom, always welcomes you back with tender motherly care. Sometimes maybe with a little lecture or a little stern punishment, right? But mom always welcomes us back, even when we have sinned, even when we've transgressed. It's the same with the church. The church is our mother, and so the church is home, because home is where mom is, right? We love dad too, and dad's awesome, but there's a difference in sort of that tenderness that comes from mom than what comes from dad. Men are classically sort of task-oriented, and women are really person-oriented. And we find that with our moms, we find that with the church, because home is where mom is, and Church is our spiritual mom. She teaches us, she nourishes us, she forgives us, she takes care of us, as does the church. We say we believe in one holy Catholic and apostolic church. These are the marks of the church. And when we say the word Catholic, we mean, the Greek word katholikos means universal. It means embracing the whole. It comes from the phrase katahulu, which is about the whole. It refers to the universal nature of the church and the fullness of the church, the wholeness of the church, in several ways. First of all, the church has the fullness of the means of salvation, right? The church has the fullness of the truth and the fullness of the means that are necessary for salvation on one level. On another level, the church is Catholic, universal, because she has a mission to the whole world and is present everywhere in the world in each particular church, in each local church, in each diocese, through that communion that exists between all the individual churches and the universal church. Keeping in mind that the church is not a sum of its parts, right? If the Diocese of Arlington ceased to exist tomorrow and there were no Catholics in Northern Virginia, as there were no Catholics in Virginia before the Christianity was brought to the New World, that would not take anything away from the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church in her universality and her fullness would still exist. So the church is not a sum of the parts of its whole, but every part that is in communion with the rest of it is perfectly one with the rest and part of that Catholic universalism and that Catholic unity. And because the church is our home, and because the church is found everywhere throughout the world in her universal nature, then we can find a home in the church wherever we go in the world. And this is where I'd like to sort of transition to sharing with you some personal experiences I've had of finding a home in the church, no matter where I've been, whether it's Latin America or Asia or Europe and Africa and parts in between. I mean, I was baptized in the state of New Mexico. I made my first penance in Mexico City. I made my first communion in Santiago, Chile. I was confirmed in Reston, Virginia. I was ordained a deacon and a priest here in Arlington. I spent my kindergarten in Panama, first and second grade in Chile, third and fourth grade in Mexico, senior year of high school in Rome, junior year of college in France, 4 years in Rome, studying as a priest, a summer internship in Egypt, 3 years in Ethiopia, and traveled to points in between. And in all of these experiences, I've experienced the richness of the Catholic faith, as it's lived out in very different ways in different places, because of the inculturation of the church, making herself present and embracing the goodness of local cultures, but still the same faith, the same sacraments, the same unity in charity, no matter where you go. Having spent my childhood in Latin America, I was especially blessed to experience the richness of Latin Catholicism, which is, of course, a very strong offshoot of Mediterranean Catholicism. Also, I would say I come from an Italian-American family. My mother's Italian-American, and she grew up with her immigrant Italian grandparents. And so the cultural link there was very strong. So although in many ways I'm very, let's say I'm very Anglo-Saxon and very sort of type A and ENTJ and OCD, whatever, I always joke with my friends who understand that OCD are the initials of the Carmelite order, right? The Order of Carmelites Discalced. I'm OCD, but it's really OC, not OCD. It's not a disorder, right? Obsessive compulsive isn't a disorder. But as Anglo-Saxon as I am, and as much as my temperament is like that, very much deep in my heart also is this experience of this Latin Catholicism, which is a very warm and passionate and affectionate way of understanding the faith and the human experience, right? It's funny, friends have remarked, many people have remarked over the years, and it's still, in some ways, it's a mystery to me, and yet this is rooted in what I'm talking about in my experience. When I preach, and when I say Mass and when I preach in Spanish, I'm a different person than when I preach in English. And I don't turn it on and I don't turn it off, I don't calculate it, but people come to Spanish like, is that the same person? Like, in some ways, it's just odd. I feel more relaxed and more passionate when I preach in Spanish. You guys are like, well, then we wish we could hear you in Spanish, right? but it's really a fruit of that Latin Catholicism being deep in me. And I really encourage you, whether you have traveled or not, and had experiences of Latin Catholicism, and by that I mean not just Latin America, but also Spain, Italy, France, right? The Latin countries that are Catholic. I encourage you as much as possible to travel and to experience the richness of those Catholic cultures at every level. That includes my senior year of high school. As I mentioned, my senior year of high school was in Rome, and that was also an interesting experience of the universality of the church on many levels. I had gone to public schools in Fairfax County. We were in the States for a number of years, and then my father was assigned to Rome for my senior year of high school. And you can imagine, after being here at the same middle school and high school for 5 years, having to uproot and graduate and finish with total strangers in another country far away, in a country where I didn't speak the language. I grew up with Spanish but didn't speak Italian. So that was my 1 year of Catholic school. I actually graduated from a Catholic high school, even though I didn't go to Catholic school before that at all. And it was a boys' school, so I always went to co-ed schools, and I always went to, high school. My high school experience was in suburban America, very American experience, the football games on Friday nights and debate team and all that kind of stuff. But so going from that to a Catholic school, which is only boys in a foreign country where I don't speak the language, was, as you can imagine, a challenge in some ways, but because it was a Catholic school, because it was a church school, which was dedicated to the mission of the church, I found a home there. I instantly felt at home. I instantly felt welcomed. I instantly felt that I was part of the family at that school. And it was a wonderful experience, despite the fact that, as you can imagine, it was a challenge to go from what was so familiar for so long, for that just 1 year of last year of high school, to go to this very foreign and different experience. And yet it was a wonderful experience. Not to mention the fact that as a 17-year-old, I got to meet a saint personally, St. John Paul II, that great pope. Another experience I'd like to share with you about universality of the church and really finding a home in the church. And it's an experience that really has marked me to this day. Unfortunately, I have not kept in touch with, and I'm not really close friends with any of my friends from that 1 year of high school. I do have friends, great Catholic friends from my high school here in Reston, but really not keep in touch with anyone from that 1 year of Catholic school in Rome. Although I'm part of the Facebook page, and there's all kinds of great stuff on that there. But I had an extraordinary experience in college of finding a home in the church. So I went to the College of William and Mary, and I was a government major, but also I ended up majoring in French because I studied French for many years in high school and in college. And so I spent my junior year of college in southern France. In the meantime, my parents were assigned to the embassy in Madrid. So I actually ended up, it was kind of ironic, being in southern France, I was actually closer to home than if I'd stayed at William and Mary in the States, right? Because my parents were in Madrid. In any event, after my first year of college, instead of staying in the States and working here, there was a program for employment for dependents of foreign service officers at the embassy in Madrid. So my dad said, come on over. So after my freshman year of college, I went to Spain to stay with my parents and to work at the embassy. Now, I hadn't spoken Spanish for 10 years, and I'd been studying French like crazy because I was really passionate about French. And what happened is I got to Spain, and again, I hadn't spoken Spanish in 10 years. It was super rusty. And I was working at the U.S. Embassy during the day. In English, I was in the citizen services section of the consulate, so helping Americans, assisting Americans with needs. But in the evening, because I was a pretty devout college student, in the evening after work at the embassy during the day, I would go to the local parish for Mass. And that was the parish of Our Lady of Buen Suceso, Our Lady of Good Fortune, it's a well-known parish on a major thoroughfare in the heart of Madrid. And so I started going to daily Mass. I think it was 8 p.m. every day. And I'd go, and after like a couple of weeks, I noticed that after Mass, the sacristy was just off the side of the sanctuary. And I noticed after Mass, there was all these young people at Mass, like high school age students and college age kids. And after Mass, all these young people would go up in the sacristy, and I could see them through the door in the sacristy. They're all hanging around, talking and chatting, and the priest was there, and they're chatting with the priest. And I was like, this is all, like, what's going on here? So because I am an extrovert, radical extrovert, and have no shame whatsoever, and at this point, my Spanish is not back. Like, I hadn't spoken Spanish for 10 years, but It was deep in there. One of those days after Mass, I just boldly went into the sacristy and I just kind of faked the Spanish. And the first guy I met there, I just said, "Excuse me, is this some kind of youth group or something?" And he just beamed. And his name was Luis Fernandez Vaquero, who ended up becoming one of my dearest friends. Ended up celebrating his wedding with his wife, who was also a member of this group. At that point, he was I think he was a senior in high school and on his way to college, and I was just a freshman, finishing my freshman year of college. But ended up baptizing his babies. Actually, I went on their honeymoon too. No, because I went to Madrid for their wedding years later as a priest, and then they decided to have their honeymoon here in the United States. So it's like, yeah, the priest shows you around Washington and New York for your honeymoon in any event. But I tell you, it just turned out that Luis was studying English philology and was an English major and loved the English language. So these kids, these high school and college students, my age, some older, some younger, welcomed me into their lives and into their homes and their families. And to this day, when I go to Spain, I stay with Doña Carmen, Luis's mother. She's like my Spanish mom. And they welcome me into their homes. I would attend then from then on daily Mass every day at 8 p.m. And then after the Spanish tradition, after Mass, we'd go out and have a beer or a drink or something. Then everyone would go home for the late Spanish dinner. But when it came time for the parish camp out for the summer, huge camp they ran for kids, I was invited to the camp. They would invite me over to their families' houses for Sunday dinners and everything. And they became true friends, deep Christian friends that will be friends for a lifetime. And now Luis's children have come here, and I've shown his children around, around Washington and New York. They're like my kids, This would not have happened if not for being at Mass. I was a foreigner. I could barely speak the language. The other thing they did is they got me back to Spanish, because that Spanish was there. I spoke Spanish from kindergarten through fourth grade, and my school was half the day in English, half the day in Spanish. So it was deep in there. And thanks to my friends in Madrid, that Spanish came back, because they corrected me every time I made a mistake, and they were bound and determined for me to get that right. And thanks to them, I totally rediscovered and rediscovered that fluency in Spanish again, now at an adult level. But it was only in and thanks to the local parish church that this happened, that I was able to find a community, a home, friends for a lifetime. Some of my dearest friends in the world, right? That's because of who I met at church, because the church is home. At that same time, as I said, I spent my junior year of college in France, and I was blessed to stay with a family, and they were a practicing Catholic family. They were a wonderful family, but I would go to Mass at the local parish on Sundays, and the temptation was to be depressed, because there's a big old stone church, and there was this poor little old priest who was a holy priest, evidently a holy man. He was about 3.5 feet tall, but he was a good and holy man, and he was working for the Lord. And it was him and me and about 20 old ladies and a couple of old men in this freezing church in southern, this stone church. And but I tell you, he made of course, I was the only young guy there. So of course the pastor, the priest made such a fuss about every Sunday. It was like, and the little old ladies, of course, they loved seeing, a young man in church. That was so sweet. Yeah. And I'm telling you, if I had asked them to adopt me and take me home for dinner, they would have, right? But they were I did feel welcomed and at home there. And I didn't get to know any of them really well. I don't even remember the name of the priest. I think my French family would remember the name of the priest, because he was pastor there for many years. And I had a family that I was staying with, right? That was part of the program. But I knew, I always felt welcomed in that parish church. Despite the coldness of the experience and the difference in age and experience, they always made a fuss over me, and they always made a point of saying hello and greeting me and chatting me up after Mass. Wonderful people. I've got so many more experiences, but I'm running out of time. Let me share one of my favorites with you, which is an experience of ecumenism in the church. And that is, strictly speaking, there are churches and there are ecclesial communions. What we call Protestant churches, technically, in Catholic theology are ecclesial communions. They're not true churches because they don't have all the marks of the church. They don't have all of the sacraments. They don't have the full Catholic faith. Whereas we refer to the Orthodox churches as true churches because we share the same faith with them and we share the same sacraments with them. Well, I spent 2.5 years in Ethiopia, a very special assignment, working in the Vatican Diplomatic Service at the Vatican Embassy. In that capacity, I had 13 local employees that reported to me that were all Ethiopians, and they were mostly Orthodox, although some were Catholic and one was Muslim. Our driver was Muslim. And so the administrative assistant, who was a very sharp and very devout Ethiopian Orthodox Christian, told me once he was married and he had been married for a few years and they had been unable to conceive a child. And he told me once, I mean, this is an Orthodox Christian, right? Young man. He said, "Father, when I was young, I had one prayer. And my prayer was, Lord, this world is so evil and so wicked and so terrible and so sinful. Lord, take me out of this world." But the Lord did not hear my prayer. So then my second prayer was, Lord, if I'm to remain in this world, I am not worthy to be a priest. At least call me and let me serve as a deacon in your church and as assistant to the priest in your church at the sacred mysteries. And the Lord did not hear my prayer. So I had a third prayer. Lord, if that is not to be the way, then help me to find a good Christian woman and to raise up a family and children to serve you in your church. And he said, the Lord has not heard my third prayer either, until during that first year that I was there, they conceived and had a baby girl. And of course, they were filled with joy and then later had more children. But they very sweetly invited me to the baptism. Now, this is in the Orthodox Church, right? We're not in full communion with the Orthodox, but he invited me to the baptism. And the priest who performed the baptism was a very young Orthodox priest who made me very welcomed at the baptism. And so there must have been 20, 30 people there. It was the extended family of this young couple and the beautiful baby girl and this young Ethiopian priest. And the baptismal font was huge. It was a huge it was about the size of our little swimming pool over there. It was a huge octagonal font that was high, and it was filled with holy water, and of course, and it was a lot of it was chanted in Giz, an ancient liturgical language of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, or the Ethiopian churches. And of course, the baby was baptized, and baptism by immersion 3 times, and then the baby was chrismated with confirmation, and the baby received Eucharist for the first time. In the Orthodox churches, babies are fully initiated with the 3 sacraments of initiation from infancy. And after the baptism was over, everyone lined up, and they came up toward the priest in the font, and the priest would lean into the font and scoop up water and go splash the people in the face with the baptismal water. And so everyone came up and they would lean forward and the priest would go whap, and everyone got baptismal water in the face and whap. And I'm the only non-Orthodox here. So, but I get in line. I have my cassock and I had my Ethiopian priest hat on, which I should sport for you sometime. So everyone did this and splat with a big handful of water. So I get up and I'm the last one, and I go up and I lean forward, and the priest reaches in and takes his hand and holds it out to me. So I took the holy water and blessed myself with the holy water. He didn't splash me in the face, which I was a little disappointed, but I guess you don't do that to the priest. But it was just a wonderful experience of being welcomed and feeling at home in the church, a church that's not in full communion with us, but that we recognize as truly of the same faith and of the same sacramental tradition. Right? As a matter of fact, in Ethiopia, the big fear that the people that the Orthodox could not take, which is about half of the population, is the Pentecostals, right? You would meet Ethiopian Orthodox faithful and young Ethiopian Orthodox priests, and they would ask, and I said, I'm Catholic priest. Oh, same thing, they would say. They understood that the Catholics and the Orthodox had the same faith and the same sacraments. Well, I'm out of time. I've got some other great stories to share with you, but I just want to tell you that wherever I've been, and then even in my assignments as a priest, whether it was my first assignment here at St. Charles from 93 to 95, or then the cathedral, or then studying in Rome for 4 years, a summer internship in Egypt, 2.5 years in Ethiopia, at Holy Family Parish, mostly Hispanic parish in down 95, or at Christendom College, or back here at St. Charles for the last 8 years. In each of these, I have found a home. Because it doesn't matter where you go in the world, in the Catholic Church, in the parishes, at the universities, you will find a home. Because in each there are graces to be received, there are friends to be made, and sometimes friends for life, because you share what is most important in common, the grace of the faith, the Catholic faith. My hope for P3 in particular, my hope for St. Charles Parish in general, my hope for all of you wherever you go in your lives, for the rest of your lives, is that in the church you will find a home. Not just a home, again, like Flannery O'Connor, where you can receive the grace of God through the celebration of the sacred mysteries, even if you don't talk to anybody, but actually a true encounter in the church with the communion of saints, with the church as your mother that is teaching you and nourishing you and guiding you and bringing you together with others that help you on your pilgrim journey, brothers and sisters, friends to help you walk your pilgrim way as we make our way to our true and ultimate home in the ultimate communion of saints, which is heaven. Amen.
Thanks for joining us today, and please remember to subscribe, and if you enjoyed our show, give us a rating on Apple Podcasts. May God bless you.